प्रपन्नपारिजाताय स्तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। In these lectures we have been highlighting the influence of our own thought processes on our egoism. We stated that the ego is made of thoughts. Ego is, Swami Chinmayananda used to say, the ego is nothing but a bundle of memories. If somebody had praised you not once, several times, the memories of all those occasions where you were praised, rightly or wrongly, make you think that you are above everybody else. And again, rightly or wrongly, people had put you down, troubled you, insulted you. Then, generally, it's very difficult to be free of the impact of those sad experiences. Your mind will have a sense of, I am no good. And philosophically, to look at ourselves as less than others is also egoism. In lay language, only somebody who thinks high of himself is called egoistic. But I would repeat, in this philosophy of self-knowledge, an idea I am low as well as an idea I am high, both constitute the separate self, which is the ego. And illumination, this Sthitaprajna state, is free from any such separate idea. Context by context, situation by situation, we go. We do not carry any fixed idea of our worth. The society, the world, our own past experiences repeatedly try to pigeonhole us. Our past experiences rising in us as memories try to fix us somewhere. You are here on a scale of 10, you are on 5, okay, and that person is 7, alright, and okay, these people are 3 or 2, okay. This is called pigeonholing, fixing you at a certain place. Mind you, Vedanta, or call it Zen Buddhism, call it the Sufi wisdom, or don't call it by any name, right perception awakens you, helps you come out of all these ideas of I am this, I am that. By yourself, you are just free. In the Vedanta, that free state is described as you are Sat Chit. You are existence, you are awareness. The Vedanta says other ideas have at the most or at best contextual significance. In a certain situation, to give a quick example, let's say where knowledge of French is needed, those who know French are, better placed. They can do the job, they can deliver the goods. Somewhere else where cooking is needed, those who can cook well are good. You know how there was a great scholar going by that boat, the old story. The scholar thought so high of himself that he knew so many branches of knowledge. And in the very, very significant illustrative story at the end, the, the boatman asks the scholar, that's all right, you know so much, but do you know swimming? And the scholar says, oh, that is one thing I did not learn. And the boatman says, but now, I'm sorry to say, the boat is going to sink. There is a hole I didn't know. It's capsizing, and you better do something. So in that context, his knowledge of 100 branches of knowledge, knowledge was of no use. He needed to know swimming. So Vedanta would say, do not draw from just this piece or that fragment of information and put a label on yourself. Now before we proceed, let me say this extends, whether you like it or not, it extends to even judgments that we make on the basis of morality. Somebody made a mistake, this person is a sinner and that person is a great, meritorious person. This person has to be ostracized, throw him out of the society. And that person is holy. Vedanta does not really accept all these. Vedanta says the sinner and the saint are all actually the same pure Atma. But at a given moment of time, someone may be in the grip of certain thoughts. That becomes a reality for the present. Like the sinner may think of himself as, no, please don't equate me with that saint. Where is he and where am I? You don't know. I have committed heinous crimes, sir, and he may break down. He is in the grip of all those thoughts. The Vedanta would say, hold on, take it easy, come on, do some spiritual practice. You will be able to completely free yourself of these thoughts, these judgments, and if you take the path, if you walk the path, pretty soon you will feel the same lightness as that saint today feels. So Vedanta is not blind to the so-called ground realities where at a given point of time, yes, the high and low are as though very real. Like when you are dreaming and you hit against a wall, your head hits against a wall, within the dream, of course, you experience pain. No one can deny that. No one would say within the dream, go hit yourself again against the wall. But when you wake up, whole dream condition, lock, stock and barrel are dismissed. Therefore, repeatedly we say, this is a science that helps us wake up. Don't ask me, have you woken up? Once they asked this question to Swami Chinmayananda, my Vedanta guru. He was witty, which I am not. Chinmayanandaji instantly, off the hand, he replied, am I realized? Have I woken up? I am waiting for all of you and I am coming behind you. Some humorous answer he gave and washed his hands off. Okay, if you ask me, I have only borrowed wit. Personally, I am perhaps not very witty. I would say no. I am also on the path, but I am blessed. I am very blessed and I often feel how blessed I am to have a great appreciation. I really enjoy this science and I have at moments felt tremendously light. Nothing to worry. I don't have to become anything. I don't have to become famous. I don't have to have my books or CDs or something else sell in thousands and my name come somewhere. That kind of pressure, that kind of, I have to become somebody. Everybody became, I did not. I have pretty much understood the meaninglessness of harboring those thoughts. But I wouldn't say I am totally free from them. If many of you come and repeatedly tell me, Swamiji, nobody is buying your books, I get a little confused. And next morning I will be okay. Next morning again I will study a little Upanishad and say, hey, those people tried to, I was telling them Vedanta, but they turned me around and they taught me a lesson. I'll be careful today, I'll say to myself. I sort of come back. Otherwise, pretty much, I cannot claim, as some people claim, some kind of mystical experience. The whole world changed for them. They could not anymore see themselves as before. They had changed, the world had changed, and so on. Some out of the way transformation I cannot claim. I am not in any hurry either. Like my Guru, he perhaps joked, but I would seriously say, I am with you, let us all realize together. So here we saw yesterday that one more dimension of spiritual maturity is not with struggle or not with conflict, but somewhat naturally and spontaneously the person who is Sthita Prajna withdraws from meaningless, unrequired, unwarranted sense indulgence. We gave the example, if he is not hungry, he is not going to just eat because others are eating out of some psychological confusion. No. He is free from all kinds of confused indulgence in pleasure. He is not against pleasure per se. Please do not make a footnote. A Sthita Prajna never eats ice cream. No, a Sthita Prajna also may eat ice cream and even enjoy it. And if he has some good background, he has worked in that field, or he has, like tea tasters and all those. He may even make some expert comment. Oh, this ice cream has this flavor and they must have put this in it. Something like that. A Sthita Prajna has not lost his sense appreciation. But we are talking of the psychological domain. He or she, I would not repeatedly say this he or she, it becomes very cumbersome language, but there is no gender bias whatsoever. A Sthita Prajna has no artificiality, no confusion, no self-created conflicts about sense pleasures, and naturally he keeps away from even an iota of overindulgence. That was conveyed powerfully by Lord Krishna in the 58th verse, giving the illustration of the tortoise that withdraws its limbs at the slightest danger. Yada samharate chayam kurmaha. Kurmaha is the tortoise. Angani. In that manner, the wise person is able to stay away from pleasures. And where pleasures are mentioned, we must understand, it also covers the provocative situations. See, we are generally drawn instinctively, impulsively. We are generally drawn, thoughtlessly to enjoy something. And later we say, oh, I should not have eaten it, or some such thing. And same way, we see that thoughtlessly we react, we get angry. A bad word, a harsh word comes out of us, and later we say, at the spur of the moment, I said to my own brother that unparliamentary word. I don't know why I did that, I regret. So, this impulsive behavior is nothing but the outcome of a whole lot of residue in our psychological domain. Some hurt, some pride, some false belief, some sense of revenge, some sense of, having suffered and having to settle the score. As I give a string of these words, I am sure you can see all of them are related to memories. Sometimes we have to give a quick example before proceeding. We have a certain prejudice against a whole community, some linguistic community or some regional community, and we react sharply. And sometimes we even say, I know people of your group, All of you are like that. So behind that we can easily see that some members of this community had hurt us, had done some injustice to us, and we were unable to digest that hurt. That hurt left behind a residue, and that residue is making us brand and label anybody of that community as belonging to the same category, same behavioral pattern, and therefore those biased and prejudiced comments come out. So it is memories, it is undigested past experiences. If those residues of past hurt and past gratification are washed away, then we would be able to look at the people of different backgrounds with an open mind. We will go by fact of this person and not by some preconceived notion of, I know, if he is of that linguistic group, I know very well. Those are preconceived notions. Now I deliberately raised this issue of washing, of cleansing the residues. Now the question is, how do we cleanse? Among 100 spiritual practices, all of which I respect personally, I would give the pride of place to awareness, self-awareness. Self-awareness, being able to watch, being able to notice a certain thought rising in us, a reaction rising in us, right there, right at that time, is of greatest value, though it's very difficult for most of us. We are all good in post-mortem analysis. We say whatever we had to say, then later we say, yeah, I should not have said it. That is some improvement. Some of us don't even agree, we justify. If I had said it, it was right. Why? Because I said it. There is so much of attachment to me, I am right, whatever it is. When our ego reduces a little, we become a little open to learning. Now, self-awareness, right when the emotions are rising, is of the greatest value. It is the best cleansing agent. But how do we do it? How do we get that awareness? Once more we say, start now. Go moment by moment. Do not compartmentalize this attention and awareness. Do not say, okay, every day morning 7 to 8 I am going to be very alert. Other 23 hours I can't guarantee. You cannot compartmentalize. To compartmentalize attention and mindfulness is in fact an injustice to the subtle nature of this spiritual faculty of observation, awareness. Though there are a lot of workshops which tell you, okay, now be very mindful, go for a walk and be aware of every step you put, hand movement, be aware of outside and inside. Perhaps I would say, okay, those exercises among the 100 come somewhere 98, 97, a lower place. The highest one is where without making it a technique or a tool or an exercise or a planned activity, you are going moment to moment. Because when you say, next 1 hour I am going to be alert, next 10 minutes I will be alert, or you draw a timetable, morning 7 to 8, evening 6 to 8, something like that, already you have subscribed to this domain of the mind. In true observation, you should step aside from the mind. You are awareness and there is no time there. If you subscribe to a structure where time is an agent, time is a component, a structure where time is one of the, let us say, tools, one of the building blocks, then it is like you want to come out of something and you are using a tool which has that. You want to catch a thief and you have you have taken a close friend of the thief as your assistant. It's not going to help. To catch a thief, don't have any assistant who is close to that thief. In the same way, time is itself part of, in the Vedanta we call Maya. Desha, Kala and Karyakarana Bhava. These are the three building blocks of Maya. Space, time and causation. And awareness is something above this Maya. Therefore, if possible, try to be aware. It's not even trying, but it's the limitation of language. Take care of this moment. Take care of this moment. Do not say, okay, can I have a 5-year plan for increased awareness? Rather, begin now. Really, you don't know whether you will be there for 5 years. None of us knows how long we will be. Let me not be so philosophical. But to do justice to self-inquiry or self-observation, which are one and the same, one has to have this wakefulness right now, here and now, at a given moment of time, here and now, step aside from time, from space, from causation, from a label, from anything that thought puts together. Your image about yourself is put together by thought processes. Whenever I use the generic word thought, it means thought processes. It includes memories. I am a very virtuous person. Suppose you think you are having an image of yourself like that. My mother has 7 children and I am the most religious one among them. Like that, suppose one of you thinks. That image you have is based on certain memories which are thought. So thought creates that idea of who you are. Now step aside from it. Look at it. Don't condemn it. Don't say, oh no, I am not virtuous. In fact, I am the worst one among the 7. That is going to the opposite. Don't go from one illusion to its opposite illusion. Neither condemn yourself nor justify yourself, but look at what thought is doing. Then something may happen. Don't be too eager for something to happen. There was a man who was meditating and he had kept a mirror by his side. Every 5 minutes he holds the mirror in front of his face. Is my face looking more radiant? I have been meditating. There should be some shine. That is totally destructive. Now Sri Krishna takes us further, and in the context of our relationship with pleasures, sense objects, he has a wonderful, insightful observation to make. Please see 59. Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehinaha rasavarjam rasopyasya param drishtva nivartate. Together, Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehinaha rasavarjam rasopyasya param drishtva nivartate. We'll see this first. His statement is, lot of people recognize that they have become slaves to the pleasure drive. Let's keep the language and the context limited to pleasure. But one last time, let me mention, all this equally applies to the anger drive. To things we like, we rush towards them to have them. And things we do not like, emotions rush up in us to condemn or to scream at them and so on. In emotional intelligence these days, they have a component called impulse control. Emotional intelligence has many components. stress tolerance, empathy, or even self-awareness, and there are many things together make you a mature person in terms of EQ. IQ is logic, mathematical abilities, character recognition, pattern recognition, and putting two and two together, and all that. Finance sense, that is all IQ. In EQ, you have components like feeling for another's sorrow, understanding your own emotions better, and so on. One of them is impulse control, and in impulse control, there are two aspects. One is how you handle your impulse to enjoy. When the impulse arises, by definition, impulse is something that rose or that rises without prior notice. You had not thought at all. But at the sight of some enjoyable object, suddenly every plan changes. All earlier plans change and you go for the pleasure. And another impulse is when something provokes you, you had not thought of hurting the other person, but a bad word might arise, come out of you. So impulse to get angry and impulse to enjoy pleasure, these are two kinds of impulses. If you notice yourself or others, you find that in nature, in the way we are made, some of us are excellent in one kind of impulse control. As anger rises, we are able to hold back. But we may be poor in the impulse to enjoy. Some others may be good in the second one and the poor in the first one. Not all are equal. So you and I need to understand what are our behavioral patterns. In this verse which we just now read, Sri Krishna's interesting comment is, if people try to control themselves or even practice certain things, the one word he uses here is niraharasya. Let us say somebody says, I am going to develop self-control, and therefore, you know what? I have decided not to eat sweets for so many days, or not to take coffee or tea, or not to have some other pleasure. Ahara means enjoying, taking. Nirahara means not taking. So somebody doesn't take for a length of time. Sometimes institutions come behind you and prevent you from, like children in some residential, ashram-run schools. Poor boys and girls, they very much want to enjoy certain things, but the school may say, residential school, no, you got to get up at 4, do yoga, run. In certain places, some kind of excessive, rules and regulations may be there. Then it is said that when these boys and girls then after 3 years, 4 years at such a school, change over to another school, another place where there are no such rules, a good percentage of them just burst out. They eat much more than others, they enjoy much more than others, because in their case, because it was institutionally imposed, there was so much suppression. And like a spring which was held, pressed down, jumps out when you remove the hand, these boys and girls might become very indulgent. Leave alone some simple pleasures, they may even go for alcohol and smoking and all that. It is observed that sometimes it happens like that. Now let us not talk about control imposed by institution or organization. You and I sometimes observe some vrata. Many of you may know in South India there is something called Shabarimalai. 40 days people, they go to this pilgrimage at Shabarimalai. And for 40 days, I think, or is 40 weeks, 40 days, they observe a whole lot of rules. Those who are smoking a lot, don't smoke even one cigarette those 40 days. then they sleep on plain floor, not on a soft bed. Many rules they observe. And that kind of self-imposed control, and Lord Krishna is very insightful. He says, well, if you thus avoid indulgence for a length of time, quite possibly you will come to a state where you begin to think, I am free. I really don't need. I am pretty much, free of those impulses. I do not have those desires. I have risen to a higher state of whatever, consciousness. But the one adverb here is the main word to be noticed. Vishayaha vinivartante, sense objects go away from you. Adi Shankara says it could mean sense objects, or you keep away then. You seem to avoid. You seem to say, I don't need this pleasure, I'm okay, etc. Because otherwise it's a little poetic language. Vishayas, sound, smell, touch, form, taste, etc. Shabda, sparsha, rupa, rasa, gandha, they are called the 5 Vishayas. So, do they go away or do we keep away? Adi Shankara in his commentary says, either way you may take, but he mainly gives the meaning that you may succeed in keeping away, but the one word which I said is very important is rasa varjam. Rasa varjam is an adverb in this sentence, which means rasam varjayitva, leaving behind a hidden taste. Because you did not enjoy certain pleasures for a length of time, the urges in you may go to background. They may appear to have disappeared, but Sri Krishna says, no, they would not have disappeared just like that. And later on, when a certain opportune moment comes, first time you may say no, second time also okay, but then one fine morning, the old urges come back, sometimes with vengeance, as they say. You may again, indulge, you may go overboard. We have clarified already, spiritual science is not against any enjoyment per se. We have clarified that the context here is getting enslaved. There is an old simple advice given, duty before pleasure. To students, children, it is said, learn to put duty before pleasure. Do your work first and then enjoy. And what we are talking of, using words like being enslaved, is somebody anybody among us, is unable to prioritize. Pleasure first, and I will do duty later, we think, but we may actually not do also. We enjoy pleasure, and then we may go for a second, third and fourth helping of whatever it is, and then we may even say, that work now I'll do tomorrow. That kind of postponement, that is not desirable. Then there is a certain erosion of human value. That personality has deteriorated then. That personality which puts pleasure first and then proposes to do duty later and doesn't actually do also, has, of course, got disintegrated. There is some problem with that kind of person. So Sri Krishna says, merely keeping away, is not going to truly help. Rasa varjam, because there is a word used in such context elsewhere, vasanas. Vasanas are hidden tendencies. Hidden tendencies for pleasure, in the context given here, do not go away by mere abstinence, by merely keeping away. And this is a very powerful comment. In religions, generally, a whole lot of rules, regulations, vrata, vows are all prescribed. And people believe that this is it. And what is more, on one hand they believe, we are now coming out of many of our weaknesses. On the other, they also start thinking, my neighbor is not following any such vratas. I am a more religious person. I observe Monday night fasting and Ekadashi and something else, and I never miss going to the church or temple or... This is called, thinking of oneself as superior. This is another problem that rises with mere external observance of rules, niyamas, vratas and so on. So what a pity. On one hand, really this guy has not overcome rasavarjam. The vasanas are inside and you never know when they would surface and teach him a lesson again. As though that failure, that not being successful in what he wanted to is not enough. He gets I am superior, what you call that, there's some word for it. Holier than thou, let us take that expression. Holier than thou attitude. And in organized religion, we are all aware, a whole lot of people suffer. Because they go to church, they think they are already closer to God, without realizing that is itself not religiosity. And in that temple, in that church, in that ashram, many times there is so much of discrimination, so much of high and low. Long back I heard a joke. I think a black man went to a church without realizing that was run by all whites. And right at the entrance, very politely he was told, my brother, this is for whites, please go to that other church which is for blacks or something like that. So he was very depressed. With lot of sorrow in his heart, he was walking down, not yet decided whether to go to that black church or go home. And in this joke, they say he met Jesus Christ on the way. And Christ asked, what are you unhappy for? Why are you looking depressed? Oh, that church did not let me in. And Christ said, they did that to me also. So, Christianity or Hinduism, Buddhism or some other ism, in all religions, when you and I see carefully, alas, there are problems. That is how many of us go on hunting, go on looking for a different approach. And then we come across certain great thinkers, sages, saints, who many times are not part of any temple or organized religion. They are standalone, personalities. And they have something to say. And we say, hey, this makes sense to us, right? So, this nirahara, just an external arrangement, 40 days I am not going to eat, etc. We are not insulting that, we are not against it, but it has sad limitations, let us put it this way. The vows and vratas and rules and regulations, etc., they serve some purpose, but they don't really deliver the goods. It may be a good experiment for you to do it and see for yourself where you stand. But then the practical question is, all right, sir, if it doesn't go by simply keeping away for a good length of time, my urges, my vasanas, my tendencies do not disappear by merely keeping away from those objects of enjoyment, how under the sun am I to really get free? Sri Krishna answers, Param drishtva nivartate. Param drishtva means coming upon seeing. Drishtva literally means seeing. Seeing the supreme truth, your old ways evaporate, old ways go away. Some 25 years ago I had read and appreciated it but did not really fully understand Maharshi Ramana's answer to the question somebody asked him, how do we free ourselves of vasanas? The word vasana is in the sense of these habitual tendencies. Thoughtlessly we go for pleasure, or thoughtlessly we get angry with somebody, or thoughtlessly we live a mechanical life of false values. They are all vasanas, hidden tendencies. The question was, how do we get rid of vasanas? And he used two words, Of course, I have read in English translation, he must have said something in Tamil, his mother tongue. But the English translation of his answer was, scorch them. Scorch them. You will find it in Talks with Ramana Maharshi. And it had a poetic appeal. Scorch them in right knowledge. Scorch them by studying maybe Upanishads or something. But as we reflect more and more, we find this study of Upanishads or whatever, suppose is a matter of words. We learn many words. We are able to write an article or give a speech. Will that kind of study, giving us knowledge of the philosophy, help us in scorching the vasanas? Obviously not. Param Drishtva, now I can say, is in the same flavor, same sense of scorch the vasanas. Param Drishtva. In the Upanishads there is a line, Vidyate hridaya grantihi chidyante sarva samshayaha kshiyante chasya karmani. The last part is, thank you, tasmin drishte paravare. See, that is how Gita is said to be a restatement of Upanishadic ideas. Tasmin drishte paravare. When the Supreme is seen, there also the word is drishta. Here is drishtva. And Maharshi Ramana says scorch. So scorching is in the sense of, when some organism, when some living stuff is kept in hot sun, it sort of gets dried up. Many of those, not all die, many of them, the limitation of example. In the bright sun, when you put that material, it gets dried, it dies. It's no more a living organism. Some seeds are dried. Those utterly dried or sometimes roasted seeds, the expression goes, do not sprout again. If you have just kept the seeds away for some time and then by you yourself put them or by chance they fall in some fertile soil, they may sprout. So vasanas are compared many times with this kind of seeds, bija. Even in Acharya Shankara's commentary there is this expression. How does this hidden tendency go away? And he says, how does it become nirbijam? Nirbijam sampadyate katham, he says. So, scorching, connected with param drishtva, is you need to leave behind words or mere verbal appreciation, and again it comes to seeing yourself, staying aware, staying alert. Not bookish knowledge, not being able to recite mantras or shlokas or not being able to do some rituals. But how many of us are able to stay watchful when, let us say, desires erupt? When the movement of desire, as Krishnaji, J. Krishnamurti uses, the movement of the self, movement of desire, because there is a movement of thought there. See, when you desire, you find that there is a certain pattern. You see something, and whether you are conscious or not, actually, after you see it, certain memories rise, some association rises. You may say, oh yeah, that was so enjoyable last time I ate it. Oh yeah, last time I drove in that car. It's such a wonderful car. Oh, that person is so nice. To have his company, her company is so wonderful. Memory is at work. Meanwhile, over the length of time, the person might have changed, the object might have changed, your taste buds might have changed, if it is eatable, But thought operates. So, how many of us, I raised the question, can silently watch the desire in operation? It's a movement. In that watching, probably, thought is denied the fuel, denied its encouragement. When you don't watch, unconsciously, we are encouraging thought. We are supplying more fuel. We are adding fuel to the fire, as the expression goes. In watchfulness, you, on one hand, do not add fuel to that mechanical, repetitive thought process. On the other, this watchfulness is not just a blind or an unintelligent watching. All of us have tremendous intelligence in us. In ordinary education, so much of intelligence is used up in learning all sorts of subjects. In even scriptural studies, this happens. We learn one more Gita chapter, one more book, one more, and we compare each other. In Vedanta circles, it is a joke. Somebody asks the other person, "Have you read Brihadaranyaka Upanishad?" And if the other person says, "Brihadaranyaka I have not read," then this person, then you have not studied Vedanta at all. Judgmentalism. But this person then next day meets another scholar who asks, "Have you read Brahma Sutras?" Brahma Sutras I have not studied. Then what Vedanta have you? Actually, I need not elaborate. It's not about more books or more words or more mantra or more shlokas. With no disrespect meant to all of them. They have a place. But what roots out vasanas is param drishtva. Rasavarjam, leaving behind a taste, leaving behind a seed, uses the word rasa, right? The literal meaning of rasa is raga. A subtle attachment. Expressions of my attachment might have come down, because for a good length of time I didn't smoke, I didn't even mingle with people who smoked, if that is the example. So expression is not rising. So express thoughts. Thoughts also could be considered as expressed and unexpressed. Some teachers use words like verbalized and non-verbalized. When I get angry with you, 6 or 7 words may rise in my mind, in English and Kannada and Hindi and some other language, And if I am cultured, quote and unquote, with its limitations, I may not say any of those words. I may later tell a friend of mine that, so and so, that all those 7 words may come out at that time. In front I did not. But there was verbalizing inside, right? Inside those words came. But think of it. We are capable of getting angry with no verbalization too. There is not a single word rising, but there is the emotion of anger. I have read in books of Vimla Thakar, a great writer, non-verbal dimension of emotions. That was very thought-provoking to me. Non-verbal dimension. Can we be aware of the non-verbal? It has not taken the shape of words. Though sometimes we say, "Oh, my anger was beyond words." That's different. Even tiny anger too. So what is rasa? Rasa is raga, a hidden taste. And that also goes by right seeing. In the first day itself, perhaps I said, Shankaracharya, the great commentator on Advaita Vedanta, is very fond of a Sanskrit expression, Samyak Darshana, which simply means right seeing. Darshana, seeing. Darshana is not philosophy here. In North India especially, the word Darshana is used for philosophy. Darshana Vibhaga in a university, Department of Philosophy. That also is a valid meaning, but here Darshana is seeing. And Samyak Darshana is right seeing. And let me read a sentence. Na asati samyak darshane rasasya uchchedaha. Is a line from Adi Shankara's commentary on this verse. Rasasya uchchedaha. That hidden taste, that hidden attachment, those hidden vasanas would not go, he says. Na rasasya uchchedaha asati samyak darshane. If you have not, learned the art if you are not seeing rightly. Samyak darshana. So look at it. A traditional teacher is not at all emphasizing on bookish learning. He uses the word samyak darshana. In right seeing, you see yourself rightly, not by some bias. You see others, you see objects, you see places. All this requires a certain alert silence. And therefore I said a while ago that among 100 spiritual practices or approaches, it seems awareness, self-awareness, ability to observe quietly without old memories coming and coloring them, influencing our perception. Seeing rightly with a quiet mind is the highest spiritual practice, if we may call it a practice. So that is the meaning of param drishtva. So we should not think of this param drishtva as some out-of-the-way experience, some nirvikalpa samadhi, etc. No. Right now, right here, can we see each other? Can we be in this hall with a quiet mind rather than jumping to some conclusions? Once in a lecture of mine, a lady was having tears flowing down her, cheeks. I thought she was appreciating my lecture so much. I felt very good. Wow, I brought tears. But later I asked her in the lobby, why were you crying? Oh, Swamiji, I could not hear one word of your lecture today. I was not attentive, sorry. But I said, but you are shedding tears. I thought you thoroughly appreciated my words. No, within 2 seconds of you looking at you, I went down the memory lane. I said, if like him I had become a sannyasi, how nice it would have been. And for 1 full hour I was cursing my family, my husband, all these people, Bigardiya and so on, So she was on a trip, as they call. I am slightly spicing it up. Sorry, dramatizing. But she said this, that I cried because I felt, look at this young man. She is imagining that I am free from all problems. On one hand, she imagines something about me. Then she imagines that her life is such a ruined life. Both are false. Neither I am free nor is she as bound as she thinks. So, see, there is no attention. So, can we be attentive rather than going down the memory lane and getting caught in concepts? As there is attention, samyak darshana can take place. Sri Krishna has a quick comment before he takes up an important description of how we get caught in worldly thoughts. Let's read the 60th verse now. Yatato hyapi kaunteya purushasya vipaschitaha indriyani pramathini haranti prasabham manaha. Together, yatato hyapi kaunteya purushasya vipaschitaha indriyani pramathini haranti. Also, tani sarvani sanyamya yukta asita matparaha vashe hi yasyendriyani tasya prajna pratishtita tani sarvani sanyamya. In these 2 verses, we will not go in too much detail. Basically, Sri Krishna says, even learned people, not just learned, the word vipaschit in the 60th verse means very intelligent persons, very clever people, whose intelligence is well recognized, maybe in many other fields, in their subjects, in technical, non-technical, or in the way they handle affairs of the world. In 100 areas, they are considered as very smart, very intelligent, very observant, thoughtful and whatnot. Vipaschit. But Lord Krishna wants to say that Purushasya vipaschitaha api. In poetry in Sanskrit, sometimes a word like api could be somewhere in the shloka, but it has to be connected to a word which is after 4 or 5 words. For those of you who want to pay a little attention to the Sanskrit here, yatato hyapi, there is one api. That api actually should go with Purushasya vipaschitaha api. Even, api means even. Even a very intelligent person finds it very hard to control, to keep under check his sense organs. Eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin. Therefore you many times find somebody who is very smart, whom tens of thousands of people admired for a lot of his or her abilities, suddenly is exposed for some scandal. Then you wonder, he of all people? She of all people? Well, they are following the Gita. Or that is in accordance with Gita. Vipaschitaha purushasya api indriyani pramathini. The pramathi means turbulent. Pramathana is churning. Nowadays we use mixers. Olden days with hand. Yogurt would be churned to separate butter and buttermilk. And churning process is where things are shaken up. So our senses, eyes, ears and others, are very turbulent. And as I mentioned, this impulse control is very hard. You have your soft, peaceful moments. There you think that, oh no, I have no problem. But when either a pleasure prospect comes right before you, or for some of us it is the provocation. It just goes out of control. We are so learned, we have advised everybody. Many people have learned from us 100 things, but we ourselves fall. This is so common, so universal. And Lord Krishna very sympathetically says, yes, indriyani pramathini. So number 60 is an observation or a remark, is a commentary on real life. Very learned and highly intelligent people also find it extremely hard. Naturally, you and I ask, then what are we to do? Are you taking us to a kind of no hope situation? 61 gives a kind of solution. It says, you have to exercise control. See, the word used is sanyamya. Sanyama, control, is a common word. All religions ask us to control, and unfortunately it is much misunderstood. Generally, control is appreciated by us, or we think of control as some kind of brutal control. Purely through will, purely through sankalpa. Tomorrow morning onwards, I am going to be a different person. That kind of thing. Is it so easy? By simply deciding? Like the 3 monkeys decided to observe, I think, Monday Vrata, right? Somavara Vrata. And they said, we are not going to eat anything. And the monkeys sat and they started jumping. Then they reached a banana grove. Banana plants were there with real ripe bananas hanging from the trees. Then a monkey said, intelligent, we decided only not to eat. We didn't say not to pluck. So the 3 monkeys plucked. Then a second monkey said, they all had studied the law of the land, I think, or all the... Very clever. We only said we will not eat. We didn't say we won't open. And the third one went too far. The third monkey said, our rule, our niyama, our vrata was not to eat. We can put it in the mouth. So this we share with little children, as you know, but we too have that. We compromise. When the urges rise, we compromise. Now generally we think that I have to be now very strict with myself. Tomorrow onwards, why tomorrow? Why not now? No. Let's not hurry so much from tomorrow. Whatever. Sanyamya. Generally, sanyama is understood to be totally a matter of willpower. Decide and stick to that decision. I personally do respect willpower, and I sometimes regret my lack of willpower. But I am learning, I don't know. I think willpower has some place. But certainly what I have learned, which I may share with you, is willpower has a lot of limitations too. We should neither dismiss willpower, don't say, okay, if you say it is all out of understanding, thank you very much. I will not take any decisions here onwards. That perhaps is not going to work either. You better figure out for yourself. But certainly, our understanding of control undergoes dramatic change as we study more, as we learn more. The place of watching, understanding, place of learning as things arise, place of keeping in mind certain policies, etc. on one hand, all right, but also having a certain openness. Because the problem with rules many times is we embrace the rules so tightly, we are not open to learn at all. That's why I use the word, it becomes a brutal affair. We are brutal to ourselves and we are brutal to others too. Those who don't follow the rules that we do, first of all we judge them. Those people utterly uncultured. You know what they eat, you know what they drink, you know what their habits, their way of living, and so on. We become judgmental on some small ground. There may be 100 other problems that we may have, but we are so focused on some food or dress or language or some habits on that basis. So these are all brutal things. There is no openness. And what is more, about ourselves too, we make rules, and suppose one day we fail, we start condemning ourselves. I am such a weak person, a weakling, I am a sinner, and a whole lot of energy goes in that. It doesn't help in any way to condemn yourself, brand yourself as so bad. So it's not such a simple affair, sanyama, to think about it. Tani sarvani sanyamya. Interestingly, in Bhagavad Gita, no brutal idea is given. Words are used. That's how we say the same Bhagavad Gita would mean something to us when we are utter beginners. And as we learn more and more through various sources, and our eyes open to certain realities of life, we pick the Gita again, then we say, oh, I misunderstood this Krishna's teaching in the olden days. Oh, this perhaps means going about with carefulness. Be careful, don't be careless, don't be thoughtless, don't be inattentive, don't be insensitive. Sanyama means all those primarily. It's not about making a decision and then with in a war spirit to go about controlling oneself. And one more tip, important tip is given. Yuktaha, well united, well integrated. Asita, the key word is matparaha. This is the most important word in this whole verse, 61. Stay devoted to me. That is the literal meaning. Sri Krishna is saying, stay devoted to me. In the Advaita Vedanta, or in that higher Jnana Marga, not Bhakti. In Bhakti Marga also Gita can be interpreted, and I personally respect that interpretation. I love it also sometimes. But basically I am more a teacher of Jnana Yoga, and I won't want to give several interpretations here. So going back to the Jnana Yoga, the way of wisdom, Matparaha means be devoted to your hidden spiritual nature. Adi Shankara, a great champion of Jnana Yoga, says, Matparaha means na anyaha aham vasudevat. I am no different from Lord Krishna, Vasudeva. This is not in good taste for those who are, very much in the understanding of God is all powerful and we are peanuts. That Dvaita theory is there. We are only dasa. But in Advaita, this is I personally don't find much contradiction really. When you go to the depths, you find that they are all, it's possible to harmonize them all. Anyway, to give the meaning here, Matparaha means Aham Vasudevaha. I am one with God. Making it simple, in you and me, there is in fact a certain divine dimension. There is love in our heart. Every one of us is loving and lovable. But at a given point of time, our thoughts have made us full of agitations. And yes, we experience dislike or vengeance or hatred towards somebody. That's the problem. But Gita's teaching is, that is a passing show, that is a certain psychological phenomenon. Mind you, you actually are Vasudeva. You are divine. And be devoted to your own divinity. This requires, of course, a little familiarity with the language, with the model. With the continued study, you become, otherwise it becomes all concepts. Oh, what is this concept? You are divine. I don't think there is anything divine in me. There are people who say, I am just carbon and phosphorus and nitrogen and chlorine, and the day I die, it's all gone. I remember long ago I advised a lady in Chennai in some context, Amma, don't worry, Satyameva Jayate, truth wins ultimately. In the long run, truth wins. She stared into my eyes. In the long run, Swamiji, we are all dead and gone. Since that day, I have more or less stopped using that expression, in the long run. I remember that Amma in Chennai. You are dead and gone. Don't tell me this long run business. Today, why this injustice to me? So she was asking me. So, it's interesting actually. Yes, actually sometimes we philosophers put everything in. One day we will be okay. I think it has its own problems. So I am thankful to that Amma for taking a whip in hand almost. We need to examine right now what's happening in me. But even then, this expression is valuable. Yukta asi. Asita means you should stay. Stay tuned to me. In the Dvaitic interpretation, stay tuned to Hari, the Lord. Always think of the Lord. Then your vasanas will go away. But in the Advaita, stay tuned to what you have learned, what you have here and there appreciated as the pure self. I am awareness. I am not this self. I am not this ego. This self with lower case is a construct of thoughts. I am awareness. That kind of contemplation. And then, when we do that, Vashehi yasya indriyani, the indriyas come around. What appeared to be unmanageable becomes manageable. But then the question is, sir, all that is fine, but how is it we got into this mess? This mess, this worldliness, we are so full of prejudice, bias, memories, hurt, pride, likes, dislikes. Lord Krishna connects the psychological mess, which is negative emotions, once more with our mindless indulgence in pleasure, in power, in position. Especially the focus is on sense pleasure here. They are related. Like these days, more and more scientists, even doctors agree, mind and body are related. Mind-body connection has become a well-accepted, popular topic these days. In the Gita here, connection is established between our immature relation with sense pleasures and then the formation, the nurturing, the sustenance of the separate self, the ego. The ego grows further even as we become rather, or we conduct ourselves immaturely in the context of sense pleasures. Let's read these two very famous verses. Dhyayato vishayan punsaha sangaste shupajayate sangat sanjayate kamaha कामात् क्रोधो भिजायते ध्यायतो विषयान् पुंसः क्रोधाद् भवति सम्मोहः सम्मोहात् स्मृतिविभ्रमः स्मृतिभ्रंशात् बुद्धिनाशः बुद्धिनाशात् प्रणश्यति क्रोधात् भवति सम्मोहः सम्मोहात् स्मृतिविभ्रमः Some commentators call these two verses the description of the ladder of fall. How one falls step by step, so to say. It all begins with thought processes. You and I, two people, see an object. One of us may look at it and then just move on. Another person may stand there for some more time and entertain more thoughts, or moves on, but even then thinks about that object, thinks more and more about what I could do maybe to get it, how I would enjoy that object. Once more, not only in the context of pleasure, but in context of certain enmity. We hold somebody as our enemy. It's not that one or two incidents which actually give that sustenance, that continuity to enmity. It is continued thinking. Time and again, as the thoughts rose, rather than looking at thoughts from a little distance, rather than staying aware of thoughts without feeding, as I said, without pouring fuel to the fire, you and I are capable of going about thoughts with more justification. Like I think of somebody who behaved rudely with me, as the memory comes, oh, that was very rude of him to speak like that to me. And then my mind says, I have not met his father, but I have heard his father also was like that. Maybe that whole, khandan. Yeah. Oh, and there were many people. He singled me out and scolded me, etc. This is called dhyana, vishaya dhyana. In the context of pleasure, you and I eat something delicious, the joy, the pleasure is the same. But then one of us could go on thinking about and visualize and make plans for having more, lose concentration, may not be able to attend to something that comes up next. So, think dhyana means a sustained indulgence through thought, using memories, using associated data, using other related details. Sri Krishna says that is how Jayato Vishayan Pumsa Sangaha. Sangaha means attachment, asakti. Sangaha means priti. That is how you can see a young man getting very attached to a pretty girl next door. There are many girls in the town, many of them may be far more pretty, far more talented, far more this, that, whatever, good qualities you look for. But this guy is so attached to that girl whom he meets several times, because it's the proximity, it's the continued thinking, harboring a whole lot of thoughts. Miss India comes before him, he is a Mahaviragi. He is not interested in her. Miss Universe, Miss this or that. But this girl next door, you know, what is that? मेरे सामने खिड़की में चांद का टुकड़ा. ये चांद का टुकड़ा दिमाग खराब कर रहा है. That's what they say. This piece of silver in the window in the next door. You know, long back there was that song. Because dhyana, the thought goes on putting things together. Like birds bring pieces of straw and make a nest. Our mind is capable of building a whole lot of images about others, about ourselves, about various possibilities, and pretty soon we find ourselves caught. We say the world is so terrible, so tempting, this world is holding me captive. The inner story is our thoughts are holding us captive. We are held hostage by our thoughts. And then this priti, this attachment, this asakti leads to desire. I must have that pleasurable object. And when something comes in the way, anger. Eknath Ishwaran, who was in pretty much this area in the olden days, in his translation takes liberty with English. He says, desire burns into anger. Kamat krodho vijayate. Literal translation would be, anger is born out of desire. But making it a bit poetic, desire burns into anger. Like energy conversion, right? In physics we learn how an object falls down, kinetic energy converts into sound and heat. So one energy becoming another form of energy. So the desire energy turns into anger energy, and then this anger leads to delusion. Lot of topsy-turvy thinking, lot of values going upside down. Sammoha smriti vibraham. Then you forget whatever good you had learnt. Smriti bhramshat buddhi nashaha. Then all discrimination, all sense of right and wrong goes away. Buddhi nashat pranashyati. And we are destroyed by that. We'll go a little more into it tomorrow. But I must share with you, in ashram in Mumbai once I asked a girl, brahmacharini, recite these two shlokas out of memory, because ashrams train people to memorize shlokas. So I said, the girl got up and said, very good, dhyayato vishayan pumsaha sangasteshu upajayate, with eyes closed and looking at the roof. But the last part was interesting. Smriti bhramsha buddhi nasha tasya prajna pratishtita. Instead of buddhi nashat pranashyati, she is destroyed. Say, that person is called sthita prajna. The whole class laughed and you can never forget. So we'll go more into these two. It is actually the couple of verses that had a great impact we hear on Mahatma Gandhi. He saw the truth, how his own thoughts had made him, whatever weak person he was. And then he became more careful apparently. We stop here.